Okay, first question for you. 2 nights ago, as we all know by now, two people were shot and killed by, according to a lot of reports, a white 17-year-old boy with an AR-15. This wasn't mentioned at all specifically during last night's convention. Do you have any idea why, and was this a missed opportunity?
So this is recorded, right?
Yes.
Can you run it back for some reason? I couldn't hear who was shot. It kind of cut out. So
Oh, not a problem, not a problem.
Yeah.
2 nights ago, two people were shot and killed, and I think actually one other was injured by, according to reports, a white 17-year-old boy with I believe it was an AR-15. This was not mentioned at all specifically during last night's convention. Do you know why it wasn't mentioned, and was this a lost opportunity?
Well, I don't have the details about the shooting that you just talked about, but what I do know is that when Mrs. Trump talked directly to the heart of the American people, saying that the violence, the rioting has to stop, she was correct by saying that. When Vice President Pence talked about it last night, talking about the rioting and the violence, when he pointed to the family of the Oakland officer who was murdered defending and helping during some of the rioting that happened in Oakland, California tonight. Ann Dorn, who is the widow of Officer Dorn, who was shot and killed as a result of him standing to protect property during some of these outrageous, lawless riots that have taken place all across this country. Parents are witnessing the murder and the shooting and the violence, the destruction of businesses and property, especially in Black communities. And so that one incident that you highlighted is one in many in these Democrat-controlled cities. And that's why President Trump, in part, created Operation Legend, named after the young boy, 4-year-old, who was murdered in his bed, named Legend. And it has been very successful, leading to about 1,000 people to be apprehended. And it led to a suspect in the murder of young Legend. And so this administration stands firm with the right to peacefully protest and understands that there needs to be action and justice. That's why President Trump signed the executive order for safe policing for safe communities, the only thing that has taken place since the murder of George Floyd, because Congress refused to act, with Democrats blocking Senator Tim Scott's, the Black Republican out of South Carolina, his bill called the Justice Act, which the Democrat, Dick Durbin out of Illinois, called a token process. So there's no question that this country is experiencing some racial and civil unrest. But be clear, the violence that we're seeing in these Democrat-controlled cities is unacceptable, must be stopped. And I hope more Democrat local mayors and municipalities will take President Trump up on his offer to intervene, utilizing the resources of the federal government to keep the peace.
We did hear about some of the stories you talked about, but we have heard precious little about Breonna Taylor. We have heard precious little about Mr. Blake. We've heard precious little about George Floyd. We've heard precious little about police brutality disproportionate to Black Americans as opposed to white Americans. Why is that?
Well, I know that President Trump has spoken at length and gave extended remarks about the murder of George Floyd. He took action. You can talk about hearing things, or you can talk about having action. The president is not a man of just rhetoric. He is a man of action. His executive order took action on that. When you look at Breonna Taylor, if you want to hear about words, her name was mentioned twice at our Republican National Convention in an opening prayer and by the Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron, who is overseeing the case. And so we are well aware and are understanding and empathetic to what is happening in these cities, mainly impacting Black and brown residents in these Democrat-controlled cities. That's why you've seen President Trump take action over just words, like Joe Biden, who's actually been silent on the rioting, the lawlessness, and a lot of the violence. and take action with Operation Legend through his executive order, and what we saw in Wisconsin, sending in the National Guard and extra law enforcement, which, as been previously reported on other places, the violence and the rioting that we saw previously had stopped, in part because there was a curfew put in place and there was extra resources that was there. This is exactly why defunding the police is the most ridiculous proposal on the planet right now. Black and brown people understand that we need to have our communities safe and secure. Law and order, public safety is something that we need and we want. Recent polling has showed that the Black community wants at least the same, if not more, police presence. So that's why defunding the police and these calls, this movement, is a farce and needs to stop. President Trump is standing up for the Black community, for public safety, especially for those who are vulnerable and impacted by this lawlessness.
One of the biggest stories we're seeing right now are the protests by professional sports athletes. And in the past, the president has been critical of NFL players, called them sons of bitches, and they need to be fired if they kneel during the national anthem. Now we're seeing full sports leagues like the NBA postponing games entirely, trying again to draw attention to the disparity of police brutality on blacks versus whites. Is the campaign or the RNC going to be saying anything about this new aspect of the movement?
The RNC is focused on electing Donald Trump to office because that is the best thing, the best hope for the Black community, for brown communities all across this country, in urban America, suburban America. The best thing for the country is to have President Trump reelected and not have somebody like Joe Biden elected who will raise taxes, eliminate charter schools, and have open borders and defund the police. In terms of the NBA, if they think that postponing games is a good idea to stop the racial unrest and the murders and things of that nature happening in communities across the country, that's fine. I don't think that not playing a basketball game is going to do anything to stop the protests or stop the violence or stop the rioting. I think if they really want to have change, call on those Democrat leaders and tell them, take President Trump up on his offer, have more police presence, stop the violence, stop the looting, stop the rioting. Tell Black Lives Matter that no, looting and rioting is not about reparations. It's not about justice. Tell them, stand up in that way. Have the moral courage to do what my grandfather said, my papa, Deacon Walter J.R. Dennard, who was my hero. He said, it's easy to stand up for right, but difficult to stand up against the wrong. Democrats should be standing up against the wrong. NBA players should be standing up against the wrong. The lawlessness, the rioting, the violence, the looting is wrong. That's how they can use their voice and their platform. And maybe if they played basketball, it would give people something to do rather than be out in the streets having this violence. So I think it's the wrong tactic, and I think it's very short-sighted.
You think people won't riot if there's basketball to be watched?
I say it gives them something else to do. Because maybe if we focus on the positive and not driving the negative on the TV screens, we could have people coming back home and actually enjoying and bringing families together and watching people work together and show that in America, you can be a successful athlete and some of them come from nothing and make millions of dollars. That's the greatness of America. Maybe that's what we should be seeing on our screens right now to unify, especially communities that are hurting, and say, you know what, this is what you can ascribe to. This is the uniqueness of America. Only in America can you have the liberty and the opportunities to achieve such great things, and our athletes that are able to achieve that highest level are examples of that.
Okay. Vice President Pence a couple of weeks ago was pressed in an interview several times to simply say the phrase Black Lives Matter, and he never did. Is that a phrase, do you think that would be helpful at all to the Republicans and to President Trump in his re-election bid, simply to say that phrase once?
You know, it's interesting, you're really stuck on rhetoric and words, and that's not what's important. Action is important. You can say Black Lives Matter till your face turns blue, but if you don't have any action to back it up and actually show that Black Lives Matter by protecting Black lives, by supporting Black lives, by not wanting Black lives destroyed and killed through abortion and late-term abortions like the Democrats do, if you cared about Black lives and you say Black Lives Matter, then why not stand up and say, stop the riots, stop the looting, stop the violence? Because Black lives are actually being killed in these riots. That's why Ann Dorn, the widow, is speaking tonight from Officer Dorn, who was shot and killed during these riots. So You can talk about rhetoric all you want, but I'm proud to be supporting a president and a party who stands up through action, through change. That's what his executive order was about. That's what Operation Legend is about. That's what the Justice Act would have been about, except for the Democrats were talking and using rhetoric, calling it a token process. So we're well past rhetoric. We're well past words. It's time for action. And these Democrat-controlled cities, these mayors, these municipalities need to stand up and say enough is enough and put it back with some action like the president is doing.
Last question, I'll let you go. I know you're pressed for time. When President Obama took office, Black unemployment, just some statistics I'm looking at, was around 17%. Got it down to around 8% by the time he left office. It's about a 53% drop. President Trump got it down to around 5.5%, 31% drop. Obviously, like everything else with the pandemic, Black unemployment has gone back up. What are the plans specifically for the Black community that you know to try and help that worker population to improve as we come out of the pandemic?
Well, another statistic that you didn't talk about was that in the past 2 months during COVID-19, Black unemployment has actually gone down, which is a good thing, which shows that the Trump inclusive economy is working, especially for the Black community. When you talk about President Trump's agenda versus Joe Biden's agenda, in a Joe Biden America, he already said he's going to raise your taxes. He already said he's going to undo some of the things that the president has done, especially on USMCA and these trade deals, which are helping the Black community. And so the president, his plan that he rolled out, working, fighting for us for the next 4 years. He said he wants to have 10 million new jobs in 10 months. This president talked about the fact that he is going to continue to keep taxes low, keep the corporate tax rate low, which it is, and making sure that communities have access to capital is something they're going to focus on. And also, when you look at the president's record in terms of trade deals and especially illegal immigration, which has a disproportionate negative impact on Black unemployment and Black businesses and the Black community, having safe and secure borders and not having open borders is something that also is going to benefit the Black community. But be very clear, the Joe Biden-Harris ticket is not going to be a friendly ticket for anybody who's concerned in the Black community about pro-growth, growing small businesses, and making sure that there's more jobs added. That's just not what their policies are going to do. President Trump, it will.